All right, so this week we pick up with verse 11. We left off at verse 10 last week, was where a man delivered his goods to a friend of his, and somehow all the goods have disappeared from the friend's house. The man suspects that the friend had something to do with the loss, so he brings him to the courts. And the law was such that if there's no evidence, he has to accept that he will not be repaid for his loss. So this week we pick up with Shemot, that's Exodus 22:11. Literally in English, that's but if stole he stole from with he make restitution to Lord his. So we realize last week there's no evidence, there's no way to know that he stole anything. This week it's he got caught. Somehow his testimony, gave him away. So here we go. It's Be'im, so it's but if. Gano, stole. We, of course, already have this word in this series, but it's a fresh day, so we'll talk about this. It's to steal, to take away by theft, to do something secretly, obviously, to put aside. The signification taken from the idea of side, to break a side, to take from the side. In other words, deception, to steal. That's what you think of. The next word is giga nev, which is the same word. So if steal, he stole. So if it's absolutely, remember, you're saying the same word twice, and that's the way you give emphasis in Hebrew. So literally it's and still he stole. And if he stole, he has stolen. You're saying it twice. So this is, you're absolutely sure that he stole it. He has confessed to the crime. He said something that made it obvious that only the thief would have known, whatever. It's just that we need to know that we're sure. We're beyond suspicion at this point. Then it says me'imo, from with him yeshalem. I know in Hebrew it sounds a little weird to say from with him, but you'll get it. Yeshalem, he will make restitution. And if you're hearing shalom there, you should be. It's the same root. It's the same word. But to make peace, if you take it very literal, is to make restitution. He's now caught. It's absolutely obvious that he stole the goods. Maybe the guy he sold it to came in wanting his money back in the middle of this, and now it's all out there, right? Hey, you sold me this cow and it died. Oh, now it's obvious the guy was a part of the theft, right? So somehow we know, well, now he has to pay back the cow. That's what they're saying. That's how you make peace. You stole the cow that took away the man's peace. It took away the peace between the two men. Now all of this has been revealed. It's been brought to light. The cow either has to be returned or he has to pay for the cow, right? Now, if the cow died, this guy, we've already settled this. It's proven that this guy had something to do with the theft. He's going to have to pay. So he will make the restitution. The translation then is, but if he absolutely stole from the goods, it's not that he stole them all. If he stole them all, then he has to repay them all. But if he stole it, it's just something from among the goods, he will make restitution to its Lord, to the Lord that owned the goods that were brought to him. So we move on to the next verse, which is 12. Literally, it's if tear, he bring, he witness, the tear, not he restore. Okay. And if you read that a few times, but it starts off with the im, that's if. Tarof, tear, it's to pluck off, to be fresh, newly plucked of a leaf. You tore a leaf off of a tree limb, so you tear it off, right? Well, I guess I'm thinking if you tear it, you take the leaf and tear it. But if you take it from the tree, you've torn it from the tree, is what they're saying there. To pull, to tear in pieces as a wild beast. Metaphorically, it's used of anger. You're tearing into somebody, right? We still use that type of thinking and terminology to this day. even in our language. But this is the idea of the animal has been torn. A wild beast came and tore this animal. This is yitaref. So if it's absolutely torn, this is in Nepal. It's to pull. It's pulled in past tense. Torn, metaphorically used of anger, as I said. It's absolutely been torn. This is not it. It's got a little scratch. Maybe it needed a couple stitches. No, it's been ripped apart. V'ehu. So he's got to bring, this is in Hefil, call in most all of its significations is the first thing it says under Hefil. So to cause, to come in, to lead in, to bring in, it's to bring something into a house or into a ship or into a town or whatever. Uh, it's from the word bow. Come here. But if I come here, I went there. Right? You remember all that? Then it's ed. Okay, so there has to be something that witnesses, something that testifies to it, because that's what ed is. It's a testimony. It's a witness. What testifies, what bears witness. So think about it. The animal has been torn. What's going to bear witness to that tearing? The leftover pieces and parts, maybe? I'm just saying, just thinking out loud here. So if it's absolutely been torn, then it says lo, that's the negative article here. Yes, shalem. So there's your no repayment. So what's it saying? Here's the translation. If it is absolutely torn, he, the person who's the protector of the goods, will bring it, the torn, as witness of the tear. He will not make restitution. It's not his fault if while your sheep or your cow or whatever is in his pasture, that some wild animal comes and tears it apart and eats it. That guy does not owe you anything. You have to know that no matter what field it's in, that animal is always under that threat because, cow is kind of tasty. I'm just saying. Anyway, so at this point, it has already been established that the person who was keeping the goods did everything within reason to protect the goods. But something still went wrong. Since the man took every reasonable precaution, he is not charged for the damages. So it kind of goes back a little further than where we started today. But there, if a man, you bring your animals to this man and he has done nothing to protect these animals. He didn't put them inside his gate, didn't put them in his pasture and close the gate. He didn't do some necessary things. Well, then that's going to be a different story. But we've already established via the previous laws here that the man has done everything that he can do. Onkelos, Rashi, and the Mechilta missed this one and changed the word witness to witness says, since Deuteronomy 19:15 says there must be two or more witnesses in the matter. So rather than the person having to bring the proof that the animal has been torn, now what he has to do is bring two somehow witnesses that saw it happen. No. The law already established, in the previous laws already established that nobody was there to see it. So, they missed this one by a country mile. Now we're going to switch from my friend asking me to take care of his goods or his stuff for a while. We're switching from that to my going to my friend and asking if I can borrow his goods, if I can borrow his stuff. So gone from, it could have been me. I could have been the one taking my stuff, my animals to my friend. But now instead of me bringing stuff to him, I'm asking to borrow something from him. Can I borrow your hammer? Can I borrow your it's getting into some serious stuff, right? Can I borrow your ox so I can plow my field? That would have been more like, can I borrow your pickup truck back in the day? So we're on verse 13. Literally, it says, it would say in English, and if he borrow man from with close friend he, and broken or die, Lord he is not, with he, restore he, restore. All right, so lechi, and if yish al. So this is your word for borrow. It's to ask. It's used of to demand, but in this case, we're not demanding. We're asking. It's of a person from whom anything is asked, to ask anyone anything. But we're not asking, hey, what do what's the secret of life? We're asking to borrow something here very specifically. You get the idea. Ish. So if a man borrows Na'im from Re'ehu, if he's borrowing this from his close friend, really the way you have to look at this is Judaism. This is the Hebrew people and their God giving them the laws that they will live by. This has nothing to do with any other religion on the planet. So when it's saying the Re'ehu, when it's talking about your close companion, your close friend, it's talking about other Jews. When a Jew borrows from a Jew. So if you're a Christian and you're using this book, then if you borrow from a Christian, this is what you have to do, right? Because this is it should be your law if you're using this Bible, which is part of the reason why Christians have, though they stole the Jewish Bible, they rejected the Jewish law because they don't want to live by it. Work. But let's say you were back in the 1700s when Americans and Christians actually lived by this law. They hadn't come up with the idea of not living by it as yet. When they did live by this law, there was a question mark here. We're Christians, we believe in Jesus, and those are the Jews, and they don't believe in Jesus. So do we have to pay them back? Well, it is the same God, and it was his law. Some argued that. But ultimately, it wound up with the Christians just rejecting the law altogether because they did not want to live by it. All right, Venish bar. So this is and broken. It's in Nephal, it's to be broken. It's of ships when they're wrecked. They're broken, right? To break one's limbs, metaphorically of a broken mind, to be depressed. To be torn to pieces, which is used of cattle. It's used of them literally being torn to pieces. It's from the root shavar, which is to break into pieces, to crush something into a powder even. Then it's the Hebrew word o, which if you recall, in English means it's the equivalent of our English word or. So if that happened, or met. So if it was wounded or it died, because met is the word. You realize met is also we say moot, right? You understand that it starts off mot, and then if it's uh, it because it's a gender specific language, you say it differently. Sometimes it's met, sometimes it's moot, sometimes it's moat, sometimes it's what have I left out? Well, put your vowel in there because it's what changes it. That's what makes it specific. But it's from the word moot. And see, you already speak Hebrew and you didn't even know it. When someone says that's a moot point, it's a dead issue, it's a dead point, it's invalid because it has no validity here. Yeah, that's a Hebrew word. And we use it in the English language. There's many words. You speak a lot more Hebrew than you realize. You know how you say long neck in Hebrew? Well, in English, we say giraffe. You know how you say stinky in English? When you speak in Hebrew and don't know it, you say skunk. I'm just saying. You'd be real surprised how much Hebrew you speak. Though probably you wouldn't be surprised at how much Latin and Greek you speak. There's more of that, but there's a lot of Hebrew in there too. So our next word is Be'alive. So it's to his Lord. It's from that root word Baal. It's the owner of whatever the possession is. Ain, which is not or nothing. Emo, it's not. He's not with him at the time. Then it's Shalem, and of course this is in PL, so it's to restore, to repay. Yes, Shalem, he will restore. Restore, he will restore. So the translation then becomes, and if a man borrow from a close friend, so if a Jew borrow from a Jew, if a Christian borrow from a Christian, if they're going to use this Bible, however you want to look at it, and it breaks or it dies. So if I borrow your pickup and it breaks, or if I borrow your ox to pull my cart, which is why I would be borrowing your pickup, right? If I borrow your ox and it die, so think of it that way to bring it into a comparison and contrast to the old days and the modern days. So if it, where was it, breaks or dies, while the Lord is not with it, he, speaking of the borrow, will absolutely make restitution. And so we're going to go on to the next verse. It's going to tell you what happens if the Lord is with it. So I've borrowed someone's ox. I take it over to my field. I plow the field, and the thing drops over dead. But the owner is not with me. I now have to pay. If I borrow someone's pickup and they're hauling stuff around and I wreck it, I now have to pay for the damages. Are you seeing what I'm saying here? If the owner is not with it, you have to pay. So verse 14, if Lord he is with it, not he restore. If hired he come, with hire he. So im is if, Baalai, there's his Lord, its Lord, his, remember in Hebrew, it, if you say it in Hebrew, you're saying he or his, or you're saying she or hers, because it's gender specific. Hopefully you remember that teaching. Emo. So if the owner is with it, with whatever it is, if it's an ox and he came over with the ox, or if it's a pickup and he came over with the pickup, not yeshalem, he will not restore. Im sahir, if hired, he ba, that's your word bo, it's to come, to enter, to go from over there to over here. It's that word where if I come to the store, it's because I went to the store. It's because I go to the store. If I go to the store, I come to the store. It all means exactly the same thing. Misharo, with hire he. And that's the important part. So in English, if his Lord is with it, he does not make restitution. If it was hired, it, the price of breakage or death, came with the hire. So if the owner is with it, he does not make restitution if it was hired out. So here's a note I put in here. This all makes it clear that the Lord or the owner needs to say something if he believes that the borrower is doing, if the owner perceives what the borrower is doing will lead to breakage of his equipment or to the death of his animal, the owner is responsible for saying something. So you go over there, you're watching this guy plow his field, and you know this guy is overworking your animal. You know this guy is not giving your animal proper water or whatever. You know that he's beating on your animal. If you don't say anything, now it becomes your problem because you're there and it's yours and you still aren't, it's still under your control. If a man's equipment breaks while doing a job for someone else, remember it talked about the hiring. If the equipment breaks while he's doing the job, you've hired him to come over and do a job, and he's using his equipment, he is not allowed to charge the customer extra for the damages sustained by the equipment because the equipment is hired out. The loss must be considered as part of the costs of doing business. So I rented a Bobcat. I was literally just sitting on it, not doing anything, and I hear this loud popping, fizzing noise, and the tire just went flat. So something happened to it previously. Don't know when that previously was. Could have been a week, could have been 5 minutes. I don't know. I don't know what caused it, but the tire went flat. They charged us $500 to fix that flat. If he'd been Jewish, he'd had some answering to God for, but Don't think they were Jewish. All right, so now at this point, we're going to switch to a new law. We're finished with all of those. So we're on verse 15, literally in English. And if he persuade man virgin, which not betrothed, and lay with her, acquire to wife. I think you get that one already. Vehi. So, and if yefate, he persuade. It's in PL, so it's to persuade anyone, especially in a bad sense, hence to entice, to seduce, to deceive anyone, to delude with words. It's from the root patah, which is to spread out, to open. In Proverbs, or Mishalim, 2019, it says, one who opens his lips, used of a garrulous man whose lips are opening continually, someone who just talks all the time, won't shut up. To be open, figuratively, to be open and ingenious in the mind, like children and young people. Is that right? Ingenious? Is that word, Donna? Okay. This just looks funny. Like children and young people, youthful, hence to let oneself be persuaded, simple and foolish. I don't know how that has anything to do with ingenious, but that's what Jusinius said. Then the next word is ish. That's a man as opposed to a woman, a male as opposed to a female. In the Bible, there's only two genders, just saying. Then it says betula. They use that of a virgin. It's pure and unspotted, so called as being separate and secluded from relations with a man. It's of a woman who's newly married, familiar to the Hebrews, by which cities or states are spoken of under the figure of a woman. They're also called virgins, the virgin of Israel, in other words, the people of Israel. Our next word is asher, which means which. Lo, there's your negative article. Orasa, betrothed. So she's a virgin and she's betrothed. She has not come to live with her husband yet. She still lives in her father's house. So this is a virgin who is betrothed. So by law, she's married, even though she doesn't live with her husband. So it's betrothal. It's to erect, to build, whence a bed, a couch, a canopy. It's from the idea of a bedfellow, a husband or wife, one espoused. To espouse a woman, to make a spouse, there is an added idea of a price being paid to be betrothed. The, what they're saying here when they're saying to erect, to build, when a Jew said, my house is full, that means that there are lots of children. They're married, they have children. It was more about the children than anything else. If my house was empty, it meant the woman was barren, or she's a new bride and hasn't had children yet. So that's what they mean by to build. So when God said, my house is empty, pretty much saying he has no children. That was pretty harsh rebuke. All right, so then it's Veshahav. So he's persuaded this young girl, Shahav, to lie down. The primary stock has the power of bending, inclining oneself, to lay oneself down. You get the idea. I don't have to say any more about that. Then it says Ima, so if he lies down with her. Mahor, which is acquire, to hasten, to be quick, skillful in any art or business, to be diligent, to be acute-minded. So he's got to be quick about this, but he has got to quickly do what? Yimharena. It's from Mahor. It's the same word. He will diligently acquire. Lo, this is not the negative article. This is the lamed followed by the vav. It's to him, to himself. Leisha, he will acquire her immediately, if not sooner, to be his wife. So the translation is, and if a man persuade a virgin who is not betrothed, I missed the not while ago because I was talking about the girl being betrothed. But this is one that is not betrothed. To lay with him, he will absolutely acquire her for his wife. Of the words a man persuade, Rashi believed that the man talked persuasively until the girl consented. Okay, this sounds okay to me. Nachmanides felt that this law concerned a man who persuaded the girl through fraud. I don't know why, but that's what he thought. Not betrothed, of those words, Rashbam pointed out that if the girl was betrothed, both would be put to death as per Deuteronomy 22:23, which says they'll both be stoned to death. So it's very important for us to understand that she was not betrothed, because had she been betrothed, then it would have been adultery. They would have both have committed the sin of adultery. That's to be stoned to death. He will absolutely acquire her for his wife. Of those words, even though the text clearly says that the man must acquire the girl for his wife, or in the next verse, the father can refuse not the girl or the man. You have to understand, I'm not sure I made this clear. Even though the text clearly says that he must acquire the girl for his wife. But I also want to point out that in the next verse, it's going to give the father the right of refusal. He can say, nope, I will not let her marry you. But even though it says that, the Babylonian Talmud in Ketubot, you hear Ketuva in plural there, in Ketubot 39b, it states that the right of refusal goes to the father, the girl, and the seducer. No, it does not. Just because you think it ought to does not mean make it so. The text does not say any such thing in any place. It says that the right of refusal belongs solely to the father and to no one else. In verse 16, literally the English says, if refuse he refuse, father her to give her, to he, silver he weigh out, as price the virgins. So you start off with im, which is if, ma'en. So if refuse, it's MPL, it's to refuse, to be unwilling. So if the, it's going to say father, is unwilling, it is an unused root, ma'en, is to refuse, to cease, to leave off. He's saying absolutely not. He is not willing. Then it says, yet ma'en. It's the same word. If unwilling, he is unwilling. So he is absolutely unwilling. There is no way you're going to persuade this guy. He has made up his mind. And who is this guy? Aviha, father of this girl. Aviha, her father. So if her father absolutely says no way, no how, and I can understand that, I would be really upset in that culture. A man talking my daughter into doing something like that, I don't think I'd want my daughter married to that man. Li teta, it's to give her. So if the father refuses to give her, to hand her over into the authority of this man, it's that word, it's Natan, or what we know in English is Nathan. That, yes, Nathan is a Hebrew name. But it's if he was refusing to give her over into the hand of this man, this is lo, which is to he. It's not the negative article. It's the sound-alike word. Then it says kesef. There's your word for silver, so-called from its pale color, its use of money. It's you're going to weigh out. You have something, a scale here to weigh out the silver. He's going to weigh out the amount of money. Yish kol. He will weigh it out. Put the weight on there, and he's going to weigh it out. Ke mohar. Remember the gifts of mohar from some of my earlier teachings? As the price is paid for a wife, the price is paid before, during, and after marriage. Ha betulot, the price of the virgins. Wow. So not only does he not get to marry this woman, he now has to pay the mohar for her anyway. And it can be argued that he has to pay the prices of the gifts given before, during, and after the wedding, because it does say mohar. So 16 says, my translation anyway, if her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he, the man, will weigh out. He will pay according to the price of the virgins. The price of the virgins is found in Deuteronomy 22:29. It sets the price of the virgin at 50 shekalim, 50 shekels, as we say in English. You realize there's another Hebrew word, shekalim. That's pretty pricey. Verse 17. Now, in English translations, and all the ones that I've seen, and I'll admit I didn't look at very many on this one, but of the ones that I have seen, they all say you will not suffer a witch to live, or you will not allow a witch to live. Here's what it literally says if I translate it just literal English. Practicing witchcraft not shall live on. You already see something very different, or hear something very different. It says, mehashafa, practicing witchcraft. The word is in PL, to use enchantment properly, to use magical songs and spells, to mutter a spell, an incantation of an enchanter or a magician practicing their craft. It is from the root kashaf, pray, to offer prayers or worship. In Hebrew, this word is only used of idol worship. I need to say some things here that I realize our audience is Jewish and they're not going to be offended by this, but there are Christians who listen to this, and this may be very offensive to you, but it needs to be said. Witchcraft is praying to a false deity. Witchcraft is practicing is participating in a false religion. Witchcraft is praying, Lord, bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. That's a spell. The 8-second prayer, as it's called nowadays, the prayer of salvation, the specific words that have to be prayed, that's a magic spell. That's exactly what this is talking about. To pray used of idol worshippers. Then it says lo, which is the negative article, tehaya. Literally, that shall live on. It's in PL, to cause to live, to make alive, to give life to someone or something. It's from the root haya, which is to live. The original idea of this word is that of breathing, in as much as, breathing proves that you're alive if you're doing it on your own. You get it, though. So what is it saying? It's saying the practice of witchcraft, idol worship, will not live on. No one is being told, God's word does not tell us to go out and kill witches. Because then that leaves the door wide open for us to decide who a witch is and who a witch is not. It leads to things like the Salem witch trials. Other words will not live. Maimonides said that the unusual wording, not suffer to live, is used here instead of shall be put to death, to emphasize the weight of this crime. So see, you're dealing with men who I don't believe spoke Hebrew at all, but if they did, basically what they were doing is what's going on now in Hebrew. They are speaking the Spanish language with Hebrew words. It could be, that's all you have to know. If you want to understand it, I think that if you grow up speaking Spanish, you can learn Hebrew faster than modern Hebrew faster than anybody. But you're never going to understand biblical Hebrew. It is absolutely, completely, and utterly different. So these are men who are westernized. So if they did speak Hebrew, they did not speak biblical Hebrew. They took everything utterly literal. So now, and one of the main reasons why I say they do not understand this and did not speak it is because they're quoting English sources. They said the unusual wording, not suffer to live, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that at all. That's what the English translation says. And yes, that is unusual because, so far it's been shall be put to death, shall be put to death, shall be put to death. Now all of a sudden it's shall not suffer to live, or as we all already know, it shall not live on. So they knew something was different about it, but because it took everything literally, they had no idea what was different. The Babylonian Talmud in the Sanhedrin 67a says that this law applies to sorcerers and sorceresses. Many of the sages stumbled over the Hebrew word mechashepha with the hay at the end because it's feminine. But the word is feminine, not because it is speaking of a sorceress. In other words, you got to kill witches, but warlocks don't have to be killed. See, that was their problem. And so they say, well, it meant men and women. Because they said, speaking of the craft of sorcery. This is actually the last part of that is correct. It's the craft of sorcery that will not live on, right? Only it's the craft of idol worship, very specifically. It was just called something else here. Okay, so then in Shemot 22:18, literally it says, all lay with livestock, die he die. So it's kol, which is totality, shochev. And we've already had this word. It's of the man that persuaded a woman to lay with him. It's the very same word. And then it says im, which is with behema, livestock. That's any livestock. Mot. Remember the mot? There's your word, die. To die the death, to stop breathing, to perish. Yumat. Die, he will die. That should sound familiar. We've kind of already had this, haven't we? It's an idiom. So 22:18, if we apply the idiom, says, everyone who lays with livestock will be cut off from God and country. Die, he die. They're not telling you to kill a person because of doing something this horrible. They're telling you that that person must be utterly cut off from his friends, from his family, from his nation, from his God. These people they're not allowed to live anywhere near their family members. They can't even, and they certainly can't live in the nation of Israel. Period. End of story. This is utter death in biblical terms. Nobody here is being put to death physically, but they are being put to death in every other way that you can be put to death. It's the real death, because if it's saying to be cut off from God and country, the part about from God, that means your name is to be, if it's chiseled into one of the cornerstones at the edge of the town, which was real common back then, it was to be wiped off of that stone. And if it was chiseled in God's book of life, it's just been erased. That's an utter death. There is no more real death than that one. So verse 19, slaughter to gods he destroyed, except to Yahweh, to only he. I think you can get that one if you read that one. Zoveach, brand new word, slaughter. It's to slaughter an animal, especially to slay and sacrifice. To sacrifice, it is not used of pre-slain victims, but of private persons who brought sacrifices at their own charge. So it's a little bit different word. It means the same thing. But I still say, and we'll repeat it many times before my death, I'm sure, if they would change the word slaughter in the Bible to barbecue, people would be a lot less scared of Jews. Because this is a barbecue. You're chopping up an animal and sacrificing it. That means you're chopping it up, you're putting it on a barbecue pit, you're cooking it, and somebody's going to eat it. Just saying. But this is of a private one. This is, the person is so awestruck at God over how God is just taking care of him and his family, that he decides, let's go take this cow. We're going to go to the temple. We're going to slaughter it. We're going to feed our family and as many families of the Levites, their priests and their families as we possibly can. We're just going to have a big get together. That's what this is. All right, then it says, Le Elohim. Remember, or La Elohim. Remember when they put the lamed at the beginning of the word, it's generally going to switch from God. It can be used of God, but it's generally going to switch from God to uh, judges. I just went blank. Used of any God. It's a general word, so they use it of false gods, right? So if they want to make a slaughter to a god, now it can be any god at this point. Nothing's been specified. Usually, if it has the lamed in the beginning, is what I was trying to say. Is usually when it has lamed, we're talking about the judges. In this case, it's not judges because you don't make sacrifices to judges. You make sacrifices to gods. That's how we know. Just saying. It's real simple. Then it says Yaharam. He destroyed. It's in Hofal, which is to be devoted, to be consecrated. When used of men, to be slain. It's an unused root, haram, which is to shut up, especially to shut in, to contact the nose, hence to draw in, to depress at the nose, to bore through the cartilage between the nostrils of the camel, and to put a ring. It doesn't make any sense, does it? Which is probably why they don't use the word. But in Hofal, it's to devote, to concentrate. So if they're wanting to sacrifice an animal to God, it can be a God with a capital G or little g, we don't know yet. Then it says Yaharam, to consecrate this thing to that God. Bilti, it says except or other than Le Yahweh. So if he's going to do it to a God with a small g, we now know. If you're going to consecrate this gift to a God other than Yahweh, so they're admitting that there are other gods. Yahweh, and we say it all the time, Yahweh is the only one. Well, he's the only real one. But that doesn't mean there aren't false ones. So that's kind of what they're doing here. So if they decide to sacrifice to a false one, Levado, you sacrifice to Yahweh Levado and to him alone. No one else. So 22:19 should say, he that sacrifices to any god except Yahweh alone will be destroyed. Destroyed in Hebrew is to be written out of the book of life. That's a heavy sentence. Till now, it's been possible to be separated from God and country for a period of time. But when we switch to the word destruction, it's permanent. All right, of the words any God here, even Ezra said that since Israel was warned against idolatry in the second commandment, this commandment is for Gentiles. Okay, but what if this commandment was for the Jews and the second commandment was for the Gentiles? Nachmanides said that the second commandment was a general prohibition, while this one is more specific and also includes the punishment. Of the word destroyed, the Sephorno said the verb implies the death of the body and the soul. Okay, but doesn't the body die no matter what we do and or don't do? I mean, these are silly arguments. Verse 20. And foreigner, not mistreat, and not shall oppress, for foreigners were you in land Mitzrayim. So it's the ger, and foreigner, it's a sojourner, a temporary visitor, a stranger, a person living out of his own country. of foreign shepherds and nomadic tribes wandering about with their flocks in the land. But of this word, ger, the Septuagint uses the word proselytos. Proselytos. Do you hear proselyte in there, maybe? Just saying. Lo is your next word, which is your negative article. It's going to connect it to tone, not Tony. Tone. Mistreat. You will not mistreat. It's to act violently, to oppress. In other passages, it is used as an epithet for a sword, the oppression or violent sword. You will not oppress them with the sword, right? That's all they're saying there. But it's to mistreat somebody. It's what you would think of. Anything that would be to mistreat somebody is going to fall into this category. This is velo and not til hazenu. You will not mistreat them and you will not oppress them. To oppress is to put the squeeze on somebody, to constantly raise taxes so that you can constantly misappropriate and misspend that money. Sounds like our government, right? They're being told not to do this. But hey, this says to the strangers, and they're doing it to their own people. So they found a loophole. Anyway, then it says ki, which means if, or for because. In this case, it's for because. Garim. So the first word was ger, which is the foreigner, somebody from another country. Garim is the plural of that word. So because you were a foreigner, Hayitim, you were a foreigner, you were foreigners, Be'eretz, in the land. What land? Meets Raim. You were foreigners in Egypt, the land of Egypt. So the translation is pretty simple. Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in the land of Mitzrayim. So does that mean we have to open our borders and allow anybody and everybody to come into America so that we're not oppressing them? No. No, you can have walls around your borders 100 feet high, 100 feet wide, 100 feet deep. That doesn't make any difference. It has nothing to do with it. Once the foreigner has been allowed into your country, not if they've broken a law and somehow climbed over the wall or went across your border that has nothing more than a barbed wire fence there that they can scooch through. If they came in illegally, this isn't the same thing. This is talking of foreigners who are there and are supposed to be there. You don't mistreat them. You don't take advantage of these people. You don't bring in a whole bunch of Mexicans from across the border and make them work for 25 cents an hour and keep taking their money from them, saying, well, you owe me for the rent, you owe me for the food you ate, you owe me for the clothes you're wearing, and keep them in slavery. We're not allowed to do things like that if we follow God's law. All right. We might have time for one more. It's a short one, so we'll try it. This is in English, all widow and orphan, not you shall make suffer. So, kol is your first word. It's the totality. Then it says almana. That's the word for widow. It's used in other ways as well, but it's in this case it's for a widow. Then it says ve yatom and orphan. It's an orphan. It's used of a child who has lost, in this case, only the father. The reason why it works that way in Hebrew is because if your mother is a widow and she has kids, those kids are still considered orphans because there's no father there to provide for them. Because in their world, the women stayed at home. Not always. There were exceptions to the rule. I mean, you have Hannah and who else? What was the other one? Huldy. You had some girls that fought wars, that led battles and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, they went home and took care of the kids. It sucked for them. I'm just saying, got to remember what world we're in here. We're not in America. We're not in a politically correct world. Political correctness did not exist, and women were not treated real well. They were treated better by Jews than anyone else in the world, but that's about as far as that goes. So if a woman did not have a husband, then her children were orphans. That's all I'm trying to say. So then it's just low. That's a negative article. Ta'anun. You will not make them suffer. You will not oppress them. You will not depress them. You will not afflict them. To take away the virginity of a woman, to rape her, they use this same word. It is from the root ana, which is to bestow labor upon anyone, to exercise oneself in anything, to till the ground, to bring it. But what they're saying here is you will not make them a slave. So your translation is, you shall not make any widow or orphan suffer. I think we can leave it at that because we understand what suffering is. That's as far as we can get this week. We'll pick up with 22 next week. Shalom, shalom, y'all.